Hi, welcome back to Her Rules, Her Rise, where we speak bold truths with sacred love. I'm so excited to be here with my lovely co-hosts, Dr. Mei Lee and Dr. Ann Katona Lynn. So today we have a really exciting topic that I personally I could go for days to talk about this. And it is being authentic as fuck. What does that mean with leadership and what leadership really takes? Um, for me personally, I lead my life with love. And so that is something that is integral in the way that I not only show up in my life, but the way that I lead with others. And so leading with love is coming through in what one says, what one does, how I listen, how I perceive the world. As far as leadership, it's attuning to one's values and one's essence or your soul's purpose. And when I think of that in a broader scale, what moves the collective to the higher good and in being in service of others, which also fills one's cup. So, for my own journey, I would say since I was a little girl, I've always been in a position acting as a channel to lift others up and help them achieve their dreams. Um, whether that be just championing others, whether that be gymnastics. The Where I learned gymnastics, my family was an integral part in getting that gymnastics studio off the ground because my coach went to her uh, boss at the time and said, I have this dream and I'm going to be opening my own studio and I just want to give you a heads up so you can find somebody to replace me. And she was fired on the spot because her boss was afraid she was going to take all of her students. Well, she didn't have enough money to start her own studio yet, and so instead, she started giving lessons from our home so that she could still save money and so she could still figure things out. Spoiler alert, she ended up taking all those students anyway because everybody loved her, right? But she followed her dream, and that was something that I think really ignited my sense of passion and love because I was able to express who I was through gymnastics. And by doing so, it also enabled someone else to live their dream that also fed into the community that allowed so many other wonderful children have realize a dream that they weren't even sure of before. And so that's been something that's been integral in my life, whether it be social work, banking, higher education, coaching. I've always been in a position where I have lifted others up. And by doing that, that fills my cup. So that's my purpose. And so I want to ask both you, Dr. Ann, what would you say is your kind of definition of what authentic leadership is?
Yeah, and so, hearing your story, Danielle, about the gymnastics, and having that coach, I wasn't even thinking about that. So just as you mentioned it, it's like, yeah, those when when you know that someone cares about you and they have your best interest at heart, even if you don't know exactly what that is, you trust them. I was diving and I had a coach and
Mhm.
he wasn't a hard ass or he was encouraging and supportive and was very clear in his instructions. I think that's a key thing. Clear and construct and instructions, but more than anything, it's authenticity. It is being authentic. I think about my own experiences in my life when when I was trying too hard, I didn't do a great job in leading.
Mhm.
When I was just present and being authentic, sharing how, hey, I'm struggling with this or I'm really stressed about something.
Hmm.
That's when I end up naturally being more of a leader, and I've been through a lot of training on leadership and experiences with leadership. And I think, being present for people and listening to what they're saying, where people feel that their voices are heard, is again one of the most powerful things to be able to lead, regardless of what our role is. Whether we're in a leadership position, we can lead from any seat.
Yeah.
So, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a coach, as a friend, it's it's when I'm being in tune to other people around me and
Mhm.
listening to what they're saying and validating and really again connecting it with, yes, the bigger purpose. Like what is our ultimate goal? We all want the same thing. We may have different ways of getting there, and so let's look at how we can allow that flexibility. What are things we can allow flexibility? There are going to be things that are policy and procedure that you have to do. And there are things that are more about the relationships and again getting buy-in. We can't just have one. It's the technical versus adaptive leadership. We can't just have one. We can't just have we have to do this, by the book. We have to also have that adaptive relationship piece of leadership. And that is, when I've done a lot of work around that adaptive leadership, and I think that's been one of the biggest successes for me because it's helped me to be more authentic as well as, Brene Brown stuff as well. But it's when I am more authentic and not trying so hard. That's and just being present with people. I think that's when I'm able to be at my best as a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. The few things that I'm hearing from that too is like you are bringing your full self
Hmm.
by listening to your heart,
Hmm.
and you yourself being present with your clients, which is meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
And that's crucial in I'll say in service leadership, right?
Yeah.
Leading from behind. Mm,
Yeah.
lovely. Dr. May,
Yeah,
how
I
about
think you
you?
both bring up great points. And if um, I just want to ask the audience, what happens if you had a family where you grew up and they encouraged you and they believed in you and you're doing what you wanted to do, that's so beautiful and so precious. But what if you grew up in a family where there were constraints and demands and expectations of you that didn't match up with what you wanted to do? Then what happens? So that's why I want to remind parents, you really want to let your child express who they are on their terms. And if they have an interest in something, for example, I enjoyed the piano and I got piano lessons. However, there was so much pressure to perform and practice and be better than the other people and then go to competitions. And all of a sudden, that beautiful creativity that I enjoyed became an act of performing
Mm,
and then there was a lot of pressure. My parents wanted me, they were very critical of me. So, of course, when I went to competition, I was in the background. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. And it was amazing how that carries through, to the rest of your life. And then the child grows up thinking they don't trust their own instincts, who they want, what they want. They need to keep looking externally for validation. And
mm,
that's when it becomes a very limiting limiting belief. So I'm just showing you the other side of that. And then, so
yeah.
as parents, we need to be aware of that. And then if you're a child of that type of environment, there are things you can do to work on to get
Yeah.
back to your true self.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for reminding us of like how there are certain constraints that don't allow us to really fully flourish
Hmm.
the best that we could. It kind of reminds me, a lot of times whenever I'm working with clients, they will come to coaching wanting to fix a problem, right? Like there's some kind of suffering in their life that they're experiencing, whether it is just situational or if it is a product of their being or the way that they are living their lives. They want to get out of suffering. And what's so beautiful and amazing with coaching is that while they come to fix that problem, what they leave with is really understanding who their true self is. And I feel like that's the gift that I give with coaching,
Mhm.
is to be able to really deepen that understanding of themselves so that they can reconnect to that child in them that
Yes.
maybe was silenced or
Yeah.
felt like there was so much pressure to perform or be a certain way. And then that's really what's coming out now in their adult life.
Mhm.
Yes.
So with that, I have the question of like, what does that mean then for each one of us of like, what does that mean to really bring your true self, your authentic self forward in your life? And how do you know when you are in and out of alignment? Dr. May, I want to start with you on that.
I think it's actually a great exercise or challenge to get into a relationship with yourself. And that's where I was kind of fragmented. So it was always externally, am I doing the right thing?
Mm,
Am I pleasing somebody? You get your feedback that way, but at what some point you learn that you shift over, what do I really want? What's
mhm,
making me happy? What makes me thrive? What makes me creative and expressed? And when you can get over to that, and Danielle said it beautifully, she helps people with their coaching to get to that point. Um, then you begin to thrive. And then the other part of that is your emotional makeup. So your emotional intelligence, and that's where you need to understand how to regulate your own emotions, how to understand what are your fears, what are your limitations versus someone else's.
mm,
So you could differentiate and not project onto them. So that's a constant process, I think. The more you think about things, reflect on yourself, interact with people, and observe, monitor, and then course correct. I think that's a lifetime process.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Always being the observer to your life
Yes.
and who you're being in it.
Yes. And not getting defensive. You got to like own it. If
Mm,
someone gives you feedback and it's not good, well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not, pleasing all the time.
mhm.
And that takes maturity and that takes a lot of inner work. I think that's important for all of us, especially as we grow into more visibility and leadership roles out there in the world.
Yeah, love that. Dr. Ann.
Yeah, and May, I love that. And I think, as you were talking about feedback, I think one of the challenges too is that if we've gotten a lot of negative feedback, then yes, it makes feedback harder for us to hear. And so I've had to learn, I'm a behavior analyst, and we learn, we use positive reinforcement. And I had to kind of relearn how to do that and give people feedback on not their character traits, but more on like specific behaviors. So, and tying it back to what are your values? What is it that you want? And then giving them feedback. Well, this is how I see you showing up as a leader by the way you schedule yourself. You schedule and you give yourself a break. So, again, tying it to what their goals are is always kind of one of the big things for me, but learning how to give feedback I've also gotten better at accepting feedback. So the more I practice giving feedback to others, then I was able to hear feedback a little bit more because I think that's a powerful thing. And it's it's also that if we love what we're doing, if we feel like we are truly doing what we love, even if in the moment there may be some big challenges, if we're able to kind of shift and look at that bigger picture and step out and look at that, like kind of from the balcony, it makes it easier to continue through challenges. And I work a lot in schools and different kind of behavioral health organizations, and we have to step back because there are crises on a daily basis. And so we need to be able to pause and kind of step back a little bit. And so, feedback and making sure we're, like I said, learning how to give specific feedback, like when we're observing people, hey, I saw you do this. This was awesome, and pointing that out because it's often easy the 4-to-1 ratio is kind of like four positives to every redirection or correction. Is powerful. That again, that comes from marriage research, but it's for everything. Again, that to me kind of really helps support that for me to feel aligned when I'm giving more positive feedback. And sometimes I have to be really intentional about it, and that's okay because it's like once I get on that momentum of, hey, I'm seeing you do this really well and you're doing this really well, then again, it helps me to be fed and it helps feed the people that I'm working with. So, I think that's kind of a big consideration as I'm, thinking about aligned leadership. So,
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm hearing so much come forward with both of your shares is this ability to really be self-aware so much that you can zoom out.
Yeah.
You can have more of that observing behavior, and that also allows you to ignite that passion within yourself, maybe in those challenging moments when you're getting bad. I don't like using that word. Getting the more uncomfortable feedback
Yeah.
or experiencing more of those challenges and really being able to use resilience and passion
Mhm.
to then move forward. It's beautiful, beautiful. Hmm. What's ways that you've been inauthentic in leadership roles? And what does that feel like? And how do you know that you're being inauthentic?
I immediately I think of when I historically in my past when I've been a consultant versus a coach. The consultant, I feel like I have to have all the answers, whereas when I'm coaching, I can kind of again help them to come up with their own solutions and be curious. And so having a more of a collaborative consultation and coaching is like those two dichotomies, consultant, I have to have all the answers and I'm not I'm not being authentic. So sometimes I'm asked to be, I'm asked to be in that role, yet I still have to shift because
Mhm.
I know that if I'm coming in as an expert consultant, that's not gonna, help. I have to make sure that I end with that coaching, or really make sure I'm balancing it. So, because I won't be authentic
Mhm.
if I think I have to have all the answers as a consultant.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. I love what I'm hearing in that of like going back to the way that I frame coach or not coaching, but leadership of really bringing your full essence forward.
Mhm.
That when you're in that consultant role, there's not your essence isn't coming forward because you have to have it figured out. And that's not who you are at your core.
Hmm.
is that you're a curious person that leaves space for enrichment and growth and that co-creation that you have with other people because you know that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Yep,
Mm,
for sure.
yeah. May, where do you
Yeah.
feel like you've
Yeah, I
gotten
think
out of
in the
alignment?
when you're in the hardest part for me is when you're in the corporate world. I think there's so much pressure to look good and keep everything, because if you're a leader, everyone's looking up to you. So how do you be authentic and vulnerable and still be respected? I think that's the hardest thing because people don't want you to show emotion. They want you to have it all together. And some of the most admirable leaders I know, they're just very even keel the whole time. They're not bouncing all around, getting happy, sad. They're just
Mhm.
very even keel. So a lot of emotional regulation needs to happen for
Mhm.
yourself, right? For that role. Um, but what if you're trying to look good and something's going on in the background, right? So for example, my father passed away a couple months ago, and I was holding it together at all the meetings and everything, acting like everything's fine because you don't really want to get into that in a corporate setting. But one of my colleagues um, had a separate private meeting with me on Zoom, and she said, "I wanted to ask you how you're doing." And all of a sudden, because she was so caring and so genuine that I started tearing up talking about my father passing away. And I didn't know it was going to hit me like that, but I was holding up such a solid front so that I wouldn't look weak in front of the company.
Mhm.
And so I think that's an example of where you're showing your vulnerability, you're showing you're real. And at the end of our call, I just said, love you. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, nobody ever says love you in a corporate setting. Was that creepy or what? But I couldn't hug her, but I felt that her care was so genuine. So anyway, that's where I guess that's an example in a corporate setting where you just
Yeah.
no emotions, but then there's stuff underneath happening. And it was really nice of someone to go out of her way to ask about me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so challenging when there's that social and yeah, like that social cultural norm that
Yeah,
corporate means that it's cold and
cold.
oftentimes, right?
Can't say love you.
Right.
But you can,
Right?
right? If you're being authentic, you can
Yeah.
Why
because
not?
that's your truth.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think especially women, I was kind of mentioning how women can sometimes, again, feel like they have to prove themselves so they can almost come across as like very, like really hard ass and be almost like a bitch. And,
Mhm.
unfortunately, a lot of times, if a woman is being firm too, people automatically, apply that label to her as well. So it's always a balance, and I think it, women in general, we've had that challenge of
Mhm.
being in leadership and not being a bitch, and kind of like, okay, let's make sure we're doing that, being firm and authentic at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is the challenge with being a leader as a woman in especially in corporate is there is that underlying I have to fight for myself.
Mhm.
And there
Yeah.
is more of that male dominated energy within
Yeah.
that space. And so I think it's natural that we acclimate to our environment and take on certain roles or characteristics to be able to belong, right? And to work our way up that corporate ladder,
Yeah.
right?
Chatter.
Yeah, because there's a lot of chatter
That is
going
what it
on, right? That's running us and saying this is how you're supposed to behave or this is what is expected.
Mhm.
One has to be cold
Yeah.
and a hard ass to really be able to be in a place of success.
Mhm.
And that's not true.
No.
I would say in my own experience, that was something that that was such a blessing for me is that my corporate experience wasn't in alignment with who I am. I wasn't able to bring my full loving self. There were these boundaries of I needed to be a workhorse. And even then it wasn't accepted and it wasn't respected. And so there was at one point I was told for me to be taken seriously or for a coach to be taken seriously, they would have to have gray hair. They would have to have more than 10 years of experience as a leader in a corporate setting and have all of these accolades to their name. And I was in a meeting where this was happening and I was written off because I didn't meet those profiles. And it was in that moment that I went, okay, so this doesn't feel good, but it's also showing me that I have a different direction that I need to go.
Mhm.
And I can create that for myself, no matter what the social norms, cultural norms, standards are that are coming up.
Yeah.
That's not my truth, and therefore I can create my own path. And
I,
so,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I love, because again, kind of what I heard you say is that, creating your own path is, I think that's a big piece of it too, is knowing when it's time to leave a
Yeah.
position because your leadership is not,
There's-
your leadership isn't being fostered or supported or accepted. And, again, regardless of your role. So I think sometimes that's hard too. I think we like feel like we're giving up. Yet
yeah.
if we're not living to our own values and feeling good about what it is that we're doing, sometimes we need to step away, and that can be difficult and scary. So,
Mhm. Absolutely.
yeah.
So I know
That-
that we are kind of coming up on time. So I'd like to just leave everybody with just considering really what does it mean for you to be fully authentic in how you're showing up in your life, in the way that you're leading yourself and others, and really take a look at what are those values and how they're living in your life and how you might be able to bring a little bit more life to them. So I know next episode we are going to be talking about boundaries and burnout. So please come back and listen and join me with the wonderful Dr. May Lee, Dr. Ann Katona Lynn next week, where we are three voices, one mission to heal, lead, and live fully without apology. Take care.
bye.